In the summer in Dubai, when the temperature climbs past 50 degrees Celsius and the air shimmers and warps over the asphalt, something quietly remarkable happens that almost no one ever actually sees. All across the city, buried beneath the streets, humming away inside vast, unmarked buildings, running 24 hours a day without pause, an enormous, hidden machine roars to life. It is a machine whose single purpose is to fight the heat, and it is, quite possibly, the most important piece of infrastructure in the entire city, more important, in a very real sense, than the roads, or the airport, or even the water pipes. Because without it, this glittering metropolis of glass towers rising impossibly out of the desert simply could not exist at all. Dubai has done something that no civilization in human history has ever seriously attempted at this scale. It has built a modern city, home to millions of people, in one of the most hostile and blisteringly hot environments anywhere on the face of the earth, and it keeps that entire city alive every single second of every summer day by air conditioning very nearly all of it. Not just the buildings, very nearly everything. This is the story of the hidden machine that cools Dubai, how it actually works, the almost unimaginable scale of what it takes to run, and the deeply uncomfortable trap that a city built entirely upon manufactured cold has quietly built for itself. Let me start with the why, because it is absolutely essential to understanding everything that follows. In the peak of a Dubai summer, the outdoors is not merely uncomfortable or unpleasant in the way a hot day is elsewhere. It is genuinely physically dangerous. Daytime temperatures routinely soar past 50 degrees Celsius, and when you combine that ferocious, furnace-like heat with the thick, heavy humidity that rolls in off the warm waters of the Persian Gulf, the human body's own ability to cool itself begins to falter and fail. This is precisely why the country enforces a strict, mandatory ban on all outdoor labor during the hottest hours of the afternoon, straight through the summer months. Because for a construction worker, or a delivery rider, spending those blazing midday hours out in the direct sun is a real and serious risk to their life. For much of the year, in the middle of the day, simply stepping outside in Dubai is something a person has to be genuinely careful about. And so, decades ago, the city made a fundamental choice, a choice that has come to define absolutely everything about it. If the outdoors was going to be, for months at a time, actively trying to kill you, then the solution was simply to bring the indoors everywhere. To air condition, in essence, the entire world that people actually live in. It is worth remembering that it was not always this way, because for almost all of its history, this coast survived the heat without a single air conditioner. Before oil transformed everything, Dubai was a modest town of a few thousand people, living off pearl diving, fishing, and trade along its creek. And the people who lived here had learned, over centuries, to work with the heat rather than simply blast it away. They built their homes from thick coral and mud walls that soaked up the sun slowly and stayed cool inside. They wove their streets into narrow, shaded lanes that blocked the worst of the sun, and most ingeniously of all, they crowned their houses with tall, elegant structures called wind towers, open-topped shafts that caught even the faintest breeze high above the rooftops and funneled it down into the rooms below, a kind of natural. Electricity-free air conditioning that had cooled the Gulf for generations. But that old way of living could only ever support a small town, moving at a slow and gentle pace. It was the arrival of oil wealth, and with it, cheap and abundant electricity and modern air conditioning, that unlocked something entirely new. Air conditioning is, quite literally, the technology that made the modern Dubai of glass skyscrapers possible at all. Without it, there could be no sealed towers, no giant malls, no city of millions. The wind towers gave way to the chillers, and a small desert town exploded upward into one of the most futuristic skylines on Earth. And they meant that almost literally. In Dubai, cooling is not a mere amenity or a comfort. It is the very foundation upon which daily life is built. The shopping malls, some of them among the largest on the entire planet, are kept perpetually, deliciously cool, to the point where they have quietly become the city's default public squares. The places where people go simply to walk around and exist in comfort. There is, famously, a full indoor ski slope, complete with real snow and real chairlifts, sitting inside one of them, a kind of monument to the sheer audacity of the whole endeavor. The bus shelters out on the streets are air-conditioned, enclosed walkways between towers are cooled, and in the very hottest months, even the outdoor swimming pools have to be actively chilled, because otherwise the water simply heats up like a warm bath and offers no relief from the heat at all. The entire rhythm of human life in the city bends and flows around staying inside the cold. People move from cooled homes, into cooled cars, into cooled offices and cooled malls and cooled restaurants, sometimes barely touching the hot outside air for more than a few seconds at a time. Dubai has in effect wrapped its entire population inside a permanent, invisible, life-sustaining bubble of manufactured cold. And keeping that bubble going takes an almost incomprehensible amount of energy. Consider this one single, staggering fact. In Dubai, on a hot summer day, roughly 70% of all the electricity that the entire city consumes goes toward just one solitary thing: air conditioning. Not lighting, not industry, not the trains or the cars, cooling. 7 out of every 10 units of electrical power the whole city draws, spent purely on fighting back the heat. And when you zoom in on individual buildings, the figure can climb even higher. By some studies, as much as 80% of a single building's total electricity demand is swallowed up simply by the effort of cooling it down. This makes air conditioning, by an absolutely enormous margin, the single largest consumer of energy in the entire country. And every single summer, as the city continues to grow and the temperatures continue their steady climb, the demand pushes to new records. The local power authority has hit fresh all-time peaks in electricity demand during its recent record-breaking hot summers. Keeping Dubai cold is, quite simply, one of the most energy-intensive undertakings happening anywhere on planet Earth. Now, here is where the engineering gets genuinely clever, because if you were to try to cool a city of this size in the ordinary, familiar way, with a separate, individual air conditioning unit bolted onto the side of every single building, each one independently chilling its own air, it would be catastrophically, hopelessly inefficient. You would have millions of small machines, all grinding away in isolation, all slamming into the power grid at exactly the same moment during the hottest part of the afternoon. And so Dubai has increasingly turned toward a far smarter and genuinely elegant solution, one that most people in the Western world have never even heard of. It is called district cooling. And here is how it actually works. Instead of every building fending for itself, you build a relatively small number of truly enormous central cooling plants. Inside these plants, giant industrial chillers cool vast quantities of water down until it is nearly freezing. That intensely cold water is then pumped out of the plant and into a sprawling network of heavily insulated pipes, all buried beneath the city streets, running for kilometer after kilometer after kilometer. The chilled water flows into each connected building along the way, where it is used to absorb the heat from inside, chilling the air of the offices and the apartments and the malls, and in doing so, the water itself gradually warms up. That now warmer water then flows back out through a second set of return pipes, traveling all the way back to the central plant, where it is chilled right back down to near freezing and sent out across the whole city all over again, in one vast, endless, continuous loop. It is, when you step back and picture it, essentially a citywide circulatory system for cold, a great network of arteries and veins running beneath the streets, carrying not blood, but near freezing water, silently pumping coldness out to every corner of the metropolis and keeping the entire thing from overheating in the sun. And the advantages of doing it this centralized way, rather than building by building, are enormous. A mere handful of huge, purpose-built, professionally operated central plants can chill water vastly more efficiently than millions of small, individual window units ever possibly could, cutting the total energy needed for cooling by something on the order of 40 to 50%. And on top of that, these central plants can do something genuinely ingenious with time itself. They can run hard through the middle of the night, when electricity across the grid is cheap and abundant and the outside air is cooler and easier to work against, chilling and then storing up gigantic reserves of ice-cold water inside massive insulated tanks. And then, during the blistering, punishing heat of the following day, they can simply draw down on all that stored cold, taking enormous pressure off the electrical grid at the precise moment when it is most dangerously strained. They are, in effect, banking coldness overnight to spend during the day. And the sheer scale of what has actually been built here is honestly difficult to fully wrap your mind around. Dubai is home to the single largest district cooling operation on the entire planet. One company alone runs a network of well over 1,000 kilometers of chilled water pipeline threading beneath the city, enough pipe, laid end to end, to stretch clear across entire countries. Cooling more than 1,500 separate buildings and delivering its manufactured cold to an area totaling nearly 2 billion square feet of floor space. Try to picture that, an invisible man-made river of near-freezing water, over 1,000 kilometers long in total, flowing endlessly and silently through the darkness beneath the feet of everyone walking the city above. And here is a small detail that perfectly captures the whole strange, ingenious challenge of trying to build a great city in the middle of a desert. Cooling down all of that water generates, as a byproduct, a tremendous amount of waste heat, which the plants then have to get rid of somehow, and the traditional method for doing that is to evaporate water away in large cooling towers. But in a desert, fresh water is one of the single most precious and expensive resources that exists. Nearly all of Dubai's drinking water has to be painstakingly manufactured from salty seawater at enormous cost and using enormous amounts of energy. So to then turn around and spend that hard-won, precious fresh water just to cool down the cooling system itself would be very nearly absurd. And so the engineers found a genuinely clever way around it. Instead of using fresh drinking water, the largest cooling network in the city runs very largely on treated sewage water, the city's own recycled wastewater, cleaned up and then put to work chilling the metropolis. By doing this, that one company alone manages to recycle up to 80% of all the water it requires, saving something in the neighborhood of 500 million gallons of precious fresh water every single year. It is a genuinely elegant closed loop, the city's own wastewater, quietly helping to cool the city that produced it. But for all of its remarkable ingenuity, this entire vast system rests on top of a deeply uncomfortable trap. And it is genuinely important to be honest and clear-eyed about it, because all of this cooling, this endless and enormous war being waged against the heat, runs on one thing above all else: electricity. And, in the Gulf, that electricity is still generated overwhelmingly by burning fossil fuels, natural gas, and oil. Which means that the very act of cooling Dubai, of keeping its millions of people safe from a genuinely lethal outdoors, pumps truly colossal quantities of carbon dioxide up into the atmosphere. And carbon dioxide, of course, is precisely the thing that is warming the entire planet in the first place. So the city finds itself locked inside a kind of vicious circle, a feedback loop with a genuinely cruel and inescapable logic to it. The hotter it gets outside, the more the city is forced to cool itself simply to survive. But the more it cools itself, the more electricity it must burn to do so. And the more electricity it burns, the more carbon it pours into the sky. And the more it warms the planet. And the more the planet warms, the hotter it gets outside. Dubai is, in a very real and literal sense, running its air conditioners at full blast against a fire that those very same air conditioners are quietly helping to feed. And this is very far from a small or a trivial effect. Scientists project that as the region continues to heat up. The demand for cooling across the UAE could rise by a further 20% by the middle of this century, and by a full 40% by its end, increases that experts warn would simply be unsustainable to meet on fossil fuels alone. And beneath that environmental trap lies an even more fundamental kind of vulnerability. One that cuts right to the very heart of what this extraordinary city actually is. Because a civilization that can only continue to exist through continuous, unbroken, artificial cooling is a civilization that is balanced entirely and precariously upon the reliability of its electrical grid. Every home, every office, every hospital, every one of those enormous cooled malls depends utterly on that hidden machine beneath the streets never once stopping. And so a prolonged, widespread power failure, striking in the very depths of a peak Dubai summer, would not be the mere inconvenience that a blackout represents in a cool, temperate country, with the outside air genuinely dangerous to human life, and the indoor cold suddenly and completely gone. Such an event could escalate into a serious emergency with truly frightening speed. Dubai has purchased for itself an absolutely extraordinary victory over one of the harshest climates on the planet, but it is a victory of a peculiar kind, one that must be won all over again, flawlessly and without a single failure, every second of every day, forever. The machine can simply never be allowed to stop, and there is one more truth about this manufactured paradise of cold that deserves to be said plainly, because it is easy to miss from inside an air-conditioned car. The bubble of cool is not shared out equally. The very people who physically build these gleaming, chilled towers, and who maintain the roads and the gardens and the infrastructure that keep the whole system running, are largely migrant laborers, and they are the ones who spend the most time of anyone out in the dangerous heat. They are the reason the midday work ban exists, and it genuinely protects them during the worst hours, but they still labor through brutally hot mornings and evenings to raise a city whose central promise is escape from that very heat. So the cold is real, and it is life-giving, but it is also, in a sense, a luxury built by the hands of the people most exposed to the thing it holds at bay. Any honest account of how Dubai stays cool has to hold both of those truths at once. So let me end, as I always try to, with honesty and with genuine balance. Because it would be far too easy to tell this whole story as a simple cautionary tale. The sheer arrogance of building a vast city in a place where no city was ever meant to be, and that framing would not actually be fair or accurate. Because the truth is that Dubai's achievement in cooling itself is a genuine marvel of human engineering, and in a great many ways it is a model of how to accomplish an extraordinarily hard thing intelligently. District cooling is not the villain of this story. It is, in fact, one of the very smartest and most efficient answers available to the problem. And cities in far milder and gentler climates all around the world are now beginning to study it and adopt it. Dubai has been a genuine pioneer in the art of wringing the maximum possible amount of cooling out of the minimum possible amount of energy and of water. And the country is well aware that it cannot keep running on fossil fuels forever. It has set genuinely ambitious targets to expand its efficient district cooling, to keep recycling its scarce water, and to steadily shift its power grid over toward cleaner and more sustainable sources of energy. The real lesson of Dubai's hidden machine, in the end, is not that the city was foolish to build itself in the desert. It is something a good deal broader, and it reaches very far beyond the borders of the Gulf. Because as the whole of our planet continues to warm, more and more of humanity is going to find that it needs cooling, not merely as a comfort or a luxury, but increasingly as a genuine matter of survival. And the single great challenge of this century will be to find some way to keep ourselves cool without, in the very act of doing so, making the entire world even hotter than before. Dubai, sitting right out on the bleeding edge of the heat, is simply the first place on Earth that has been forced to confront that exact challenge at full scale right now. It is, in a sense, a preview of a problem that is coming, in time, for a very great many of the rest of us. So the next time you find yourself picturing Dubai, those impossible glittering towers, that surreal indoor ski slope, those shopping malls the size of small towns, all of it gleaming and glittering beneath a punishing desert sun, I want you to think, just for a moment, about the thing that you cannot see. Think about that vast, silent, tireless machine humming away beneath the streets and inside the unmarked plants, pumping its endless river of near freezing water through the deep veins of the city, holding back a lethal heat 1 single second at a time. Because Dubai is not really, at its heart, a city of glass and of steel at all. It is a city of manufactured cold, a place that has, through sheer ingenuity and truly staggering amounts of energy, simply and stubbornly refused to accept that the desert around it is unlivable. For now, the great machine roars on, and the city stays cool, and life carries on in open defiance of the killing heat just outside the glass. But the outside keeps on getting hotter. And the great open question, for Dubai today, and in time for very nearly all of us, is just how long, and at what ultimate cost we can keep on winning a war against a heat that our own victories keep on making worse.